Fallout Equestria. Side story. Gardner. By Vanner. Chapter 1. To all things a reason. It's been years since I found my purpose. My cutie mark has always been a sledgehammer, and thus I had known my lot in life was that of toil. But toil in pursuit of a greater good is the most one pony can ever ask to do with themselves. I found comfort in my work, even if the population of the Wasteland disagreed. What I did was simple. I buried the dead. From a carriage lot in the center of Manhattan, I hauled my cart. Clad in a cloak and a remnant of armor, I scavenged the wasteland, not in search for treasure, but in search of the dead. I never had to look long, for the dead always found me. For nearly half a mile around the expanse of the cart lot, there was no dead bodies, no bones, no skeletons, no decapitated corpse frayed open by raiders. Each and every pony, whether they had died today or 200 years ago, found a home in my cart, and eventually in the soil. Some consider me a ghoul, and questioned my motives. Some took to arms as I collected the dead, fearful that I was one of those growing numbers of cannibals sucking the marrow from ponydom. All who understand my cause knew that I wasn't the case. Most were happy to see the bodies of loved ones given respect. Others were happy to see the dead of the past swept away to make room for new life. And every day, I swept further into the city seeking not new life, but the remnants of life gone by, and every day I found some more ponies. My cart grew full this day. I had stumbled upon a homestead shelter that had been sealed 200 years ago, open now only by the crumbling of the wasteland. Skeletons of family hurled together in prayer were my reward for diligence. Their skeletons filled my cart to nearly overflowing, as did the supplies they had hoped would keep them safe. While I had a defined mission, I was but a mortal earth pony. There was no theft from the dead. Their payment was an unspoken promise that I would give the remains the respect they deserved. In this task they had paid me what they had, even if it was nothing. Flush with goods and a full cart, I started back towards my home where new holes would be opened, and the families joined forever as new life in the wasteland. Seeing the remains of ponies gathered in prayer gave me hope that even if the mortal goddess were gone, their prayers, though cut short 2 centuries ago, were heard by someone who cared to listen. There was movement from the rope, as there had been 200 times before. I knew at once the raiders had made their way into the already cleared areas of my territory. They wouldn't comprehend the importance of my task. They only knew destruction. One had a knife. He threatened me with unspeakable acts if I didn't hand over my cart. Another tried to circle around the cart, ready to jump from the shadows and slit my throat. I heard a click of the pistol being cocked. One would think that a pony with a cart full of remains of the dead would be the one pony you would stay away from. I stood still only a moment. For the raider with the pistol, a hatchet swung from beneath my cloak, catching him between the eyes and splitting his head. In the same motion, I rolled away from the cart, grabbing my sledgehammer. I danced to my feet, arching the steel head through the rib cage of the knife pony. Years of breaking concrete had made my neck muscles like steel cables. Being on the receiving end of such a blow was a death sentence to ponies clad in anything short of power armor. This pony only had scraps of tires and leather. The sledgehammer punched through his ribcage in a spray of crimson. He fell too, gargling blood as he dropped to the concrete. The pony who had tried to sneak behind me was met with hooves to the muzzle. He flipped mane over hoof, dropping his crude weapon on the streets below. The kick had shattered his jaw, filling the streets with blood. He stumbled backwards as I approached, sledgehammer in mouth. Now one of two things would happen. He would beg for his life, then attack as soon as I granted mercy. Or he would run away from my fearsome hammer and die later in the remains from infection. Either way, this pony would become part of Equestria again. It was up to him to decide what that was. He decided to flee. I would return to collect him within a week. The raiders were added to my already overflowing cart. No need for ceremony or prayer for the dead. These ponies, if you could call them that, had chosen the path of destruction, and had paid the price for their ways. That was the price of reclamation by the Wastelands. And it was I who was forced to collect the balance. I continued my way through Manhattan, the concrete roads rising to meet me every step of the way. I had long found solace in my quiet walks home. Most who frequented this road knew both myself and my business, and nodded politely as they passed. Many had given me their own to bear, accepting my gospel as a practical wisdom of the wastes. For those who donated their time and supplies, their families were given individual trees and gardens. The effort to bury a single pony was given worth more than their gifts would ever be, but it gave them peace to know that the ponies they had loved in life would live anew. Peace was all I had to offer some days, but I enjoyed giving it wherever I could. The wagon wheel fence of the lot guided me along the only safe path into my domain. I passed through the gates and unhitched the cart at the nearest patch of unopened concrete. I gazed out into what was once a used carriage lot. Sloped roofs, made from pieces of broken glass stitched together with buttons of metal or wood, glimmered in the sunlight. The roof stood atop solid wall of sheets or plastic, window, fragments of discarded glass. Rows upon rows of these buildings sat on the lot, each one forming a long greenhouse, each one filled with trees of remembrance. Some pony had once questioned the logic of my greenhouses. I showed him inside one, and he understood. I loved the rain, the way it felt on my cornflower coat, and how it ran through my black mane. Its quality had always been questionable, perhaps not in the days before the Great War, when Pegasi cleared the sky, but as long as I had known, the rain as frequently as detriment as it was a blessing. The greenhouses, aside from keeping the trees year-round, also shield the established from harsh rains, and preserve the precious soil beneath the concrete. When the water was determined to be safe, it was released into the soil to hydrate the trees. The greenhouses kept the clean water from dispersing back into the wastes, and the trees alive for another harvest. I had hoped my method of horticulture would take root in the wasteland. No pun intended. Indeed, some places took the wisdom to heart, and found that a greenhouse bore fruit more often than not. Ponies found that without the dead, life often did not grow anew. I drank from my still, a refuge of clean water in the wastes. My trusted workman, Gacho, had brought it with him across the wastes, and had made use of our fruits to produce intoxicating liquors. His wife sold the spirits to ponies wishing to escape from the pain of the world for a few hours. Gacho had always spoken in a foreign tongue, the likes of which I had found difficult to comprehend. Others understood not, and assumed he was some simpleton who I kept around for cheap liquor. Truthfully, Gacho was skilled to the point of magic with machines. He would have made an excellent traveling companion if he wasn't confined to a cart. Somewhere in the waist he had lost both of his rear legs. Ever ready to turn a disadvantage around, he had constructed a crystal-powered chariot that would easily outpace near anything in the waste. Sadly, the energy crystals he needed were expensive, and rarely did he get an opportunity to run. Gacho waved at me from the garage, beckoning me to marvel at his latest invention. I happily trotted over, eager to see what his fevered mind could come up with. His wife stood with him. Queso was a heartbreakingly beautiful cinnamon mare with a cutie mark of a home. With her good looks and excellent speech, she ached of refinement and class. How she and her incomprehensible husband met, let alone fell in love, was far beyond me. I hadn't even bothered to ask, but love they did, constantly showering each other with affection. Their unquestionable love for each other always lifted my spirits every time I thought of them. If those two had found such love in this hellscape, then perhaps the ponies of the world would also find love for each other. Their unbridled passion had also made some fantastically awkward moments around the lot. I had walked in on them in the throes of passion more times than I could count, and had learned some time ago when the garage door was closed, it was better to simply stay outside. Gacho gestured to a box hanging from a brand new hole in the wall from the garage. When I questioned him about it, he said something about the hole being there for an excellent reason, or possibly chicken tomato soup. He was particularly difficult to understand and eager to show me what miracles he had performed this time. The garage door slammed shut behind me. I asked him if this was going to be like the time we nearly died. He asked for clarification of which time. I sighed wearily as he switched on the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a gentle breeze floated through the room, carrying with it a chill of winter. The room had slowly become cooler, a present construct to the heats of the wasteland. A drop of water formed on the device, dripping into a pail just below it. I hailed his creation as the greatest thing that could happen to the carriage life since the first tree. He simply questioned whether it would collect enough water to be worth running. For not the first time, the side benefits of Gacho's project far outweighed his original intent. I left the garage as Kesa showered her husband with kisses, closing the door behind me as I walked back into the carriage lot. They would be out when they were done with each other. I returned to my cart. I separated the skeletons from the more recent bodies. The remains of the raiders and a few other unfortunate ponies were laid in the concrete, marking their final resting place. The skeletons, of which there were several dozens, were hauled to a grinder. I had found some time ago that the bones of ponies, especially the ones before the war, never provided as much life as the bodies of the more recently deceased. One of the Wasteland's doctors had told me the composition of bones didn't support plants the way that flesh did, but that of mixing bone meal with earth could replenish the soil. I had taken his advice to heart. I had later found out that he was a cannibal, but his wisdom stuck with me. Bones were crushed, keeping families together, and from their pieces grew a new life. The process was grim, to be sure. But like many things in the Wasteland, it came to us a fusion of belief and practicality. The bones would grow a new life, just as every pony had came to the slot to rest. The machine churned miserably, as it always did. Gacho had once said it had an angry spirit. The machine was originally designed for mulching bushes, and to use it for a purpose that I had enraged the soul of the machine. I had good reason to believe him about the angry spirit. The damn thing sounded as if it were possessed. I placed the first family onto the platform, and offered my prayers of respect and gratitude. I had christened them with oil as I prayed. When the prayers were finished, they tumbled into the whirling blades, crunching and grinding with sickening snaps and pops. Long ago, the sound of the grinder would have caused me to lose whatever meal I had eaten. Now, I simply mocked it out with a needless mantra. May Princess Celestia judge me for my actions. I do this to give to others. There was solitude in that mantra. As long as I remained focused on giving back to what remained of Equestria within my peace. And peace was the greatest gift of all in these harsh times. I found myself back at the bodies I had laid out, having collected the canvas bags of bone fragments. Each had names that had been found near them. These sacks contained the final mortal remain of the caramels, the clovers, and the sugars. These boys, had their lives not been cut cruelly short by the war, would have gone on to live happily ever after in the sons of Equestria. Perhaps they would be doctors, or bakers, or statespoets. The endless spiderweb of decisions that made up their lives had been cauterized in the flames of Bellfire, and now only a single option stood there before the previously endless potential. They would keep Equestria crawling along in the aftermath. I had picked up my sledgehammer, enjoying the familiar felt. Some time ago, Gacho had hollowed the head and filled it with a flowing metal that he had scavenged from somewhere in the waste. It weighed the same as it always had, but now struck with the force of a tidal wave, shattering through concrete faster than I could have ever managed on my own. I was always on the lookout for more of that silver liquid. Celestia help me if this hammer ever broke. I brought the weight of the sledgehammer down onto the concrete lot, shattering through it and into the dirt in a single blow. A few more swings gave me the manageable pieces I needed, and a few more would have reduced the rocks to powder. A recent attack had left one of the compound walls thin. They would be repaired with pieces I had broken from the pavement. Much like anything else in these wastes, the old was destroyed in order to build anew. The same way Gacho broke down the old machines to make his wonders, I broke through the crust of civilization to rebuild life. Our lives matched perfectly. He needed a place free to work. I needed an engineer to protect the new life that grew in the wastes. I picked up my shovel and began tossing the chunks of concrete to my cart. I worked quietly in the afternoon sun, pausing frequently to sip from the still. I could feel the strain of Equestria's clean dirt splattering through the handle of my shovel. I knew it would soon snap under the strain, leaving me without a tool. Gacho was supposed to fix my tools. He had been recently distracted with his new contraption and his amorous wife. Not that I could blame him. Still, before the day was out, I was going to be left without a shovel, and that would mean a trip into the city to acquire a new one. Most of the ponies would be happy to see my cart roll into town. They knew me there not as a ghoul, but as an undertaker. Some may have feared my purpose, but many of them understood what I was trying to accomplish. Those who had lost solace in fresh life I brought back to them. Often a branch from the first harvests of their kin's tree, word of my mission had spread. I had found acceptance among the waste as a gardener of life. The sun had told away its hours in the sky, hanging low over the waste and filling the greenhouse with light. A few of the trees were ready for harvest. I would get them this evening and bring the freshest stock into town. My eyes caught the sight of one tree at the far end of the lot, ready for the first harvest. A family named Pick had paid me in glass to bury their newborn foal. The child, a unicorn, survived only a few days. The tree had been alive longer than the child had ever had, and now bore fruit. I would bring them a branch from its broots to commemorate the new life their son had helped to create, and hoped it would bring them peace. A hole had formed around me, large enough for the bodies of 2 raiders that had tried to kill me earlier in the day, and I dragged the lifeless forms into the hole, and began raining dirt on them. I felt no remorse in this burial than I did for the dozens of other raiders who were buried in this lot. The choices they made were poor, and because of their dedication to destruction, they now lay beneath Gardner's lot. I made ready an apple tree sapling and planted it with the raiders. The Sugar family found their way into that tree as well. I made a note to order new headstones for my latest shards. You are listening to Fallout Equestria. Side Story. Gardner. Chapter 1. To All Things a Reason. By Vanner. As read by DFatman. Hope you enjoyed this, and see you next chapter. See you later, Everpony.